The silence in the room is a physical thing. It's heavy, like a wool blanket soaked in ice water, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The grandfather clock in the hall ticks, each sound a tiny hammer blow against my skull. 1 second.
2, 3.
Mark stands by the fireplace, his silhouette framed by the weak afternoon light filtering through the bay window. He hasn't moved. He just dropped the words into the air between us and left them there to detonate. She's better than you. The sentence doesn't echo. It sinks. It finds its way through my skin, past my ribs, and lodges itself directly in my heart, a shard of glass. My mind is a frantic blur, trying to catch up to the reality that has just sliced my life in two. Better. The word is so simple. So clinical. A judgment delivered with the casual indifference of a man comparing two brands of coffee. I look at his face, searching for a flicker of regret, a hint of the man I married, the boy I fell in love with under a canopy of library dust and cheap beer. There's nothing. His expression is placid, almost bored.
He's already moved on.
He's in a different room, a different life, and I'm just a piece of furniture he's decided to leave behind. My hands are trembling, so I clench them into fists, my short nails digging into my palms. The sting is a distant, welcome pain. It's real. It grounds me into wreckage. She understands my world, Anna, he continues, his voice calm, reasonable. It's the voice he uses with clients, the one that smooths over multi-million-dollar deals. She's ambitious. She gets it. He says it like he's explaining a spreadsheet, not dismantling a 15-year relationship. Not gutting the person who held his hand when his father died, who typed his college papers when he was falling asleep at his desk, who believed in him when he was just a clumsy boy with big dreams and an ill-fitting suit. I try to speak, to form a word, any word. A protest, a question, a curse. But my throat has closed up. All that comes out is a choked, ragged breath. The room starts to tilt, the edges blurring. The pattern on the Persian rug we bought in Istanbul on our 5th anniversary swims before my eyes. Every object in this house, this home we built, is suddenly a ghost, a monument to a life that was a lie. He sees me waver, and for a fleeting second, something like concern crosses his face. But it's not for me. It's the impatience of someone whose train is leaving, and I'm standing in the doorway. He just wants this to be over. He wants to be clean. If you've ever felt your world crack in half, just like that, in a single, quiet moment, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you feel like you're in this story with me, please subscribe. It helps more than you can imagine. It all started with the rain. Or maybe it started long before that, in the small, imperceptible shifts of tectonic plates beneath our marriage. The silences that grew longer than the conversations. The way his eyes would look past me, through me, as if I were made of glass. But the rain was the catalyst. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of miserable, persistent downpour that seeps into your bones and makes the whole world feel gray. I was working on my novel, or rather, I was staring at a blinking cursor on a blank page, the words trapped somewhere between my heart and my fingertips. For years, my writing was our shared dream. In the beginning, when we were living in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a temperamental radiator, Mark was my biggest champion. He would read every draft, his brow furrowed in concentration, his notes scrawled in the margins with a red pen. "You've got it, Anna," he'd say, his voice full of a conviction I could never quite muster for myself. "You're going to be a real writer," he made me believe it. He was the solid ground beneath my feet, the one who handled the bills and the real world, so I could live in my fictional ones. But as his career in finance took off, the ground began to shift. His world became one of sharp suits, gleaming boardrooms, and a language I didn't speak. Leverage, derivatives, hostile takeovers. My world of metaphors and character arcs seemed quaint, childish in comparison. His encouragement became tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible condescension. "Still playing with your imaginary friends?" he'd ask, a smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. The red pen notes disappeared. He was too busy, too tired. I told myself it was fine. I was a big girl. I didn't need a cheerleader. But the truth was, a part of me was shrinking with every dismissive joke, every unread chapter. That rainy Tuesday, I was trying to write a love scene, but the words felt hollow, like echoes from a language I'd forgotten. Frustrated, I decided to do a load of laundry, a mundane task to clear my head. Mark had come home late the night before, smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint, floral perfume that wasn't mine. He'd mumbled something about a client dinner and collapsed into bed, his back to me. As I sorted his clothes, my hand brushed against the pocket of the suit jacket he'd worn. I felt something small and hard. It wasn't his wallet or his keys. My heart gave a strange, painful lurch. I pulled it out. It was a phone. A sleek, black smartphone, identical to his own, but it wasn't his. I knew his passcode, a silly sequence of our anniversary date. I tried it. Access denied. A cold dread, colder than the rain plastering itself against the window pane, began to creep up my spine. My hands started to shake. This was a boundary. A locked door in a house I thought had no secrets. I should put it back. I should pretend I never saw it. That's what the good, trusting wife would do. But I wasn't that wife anymore. I didn't know who I was, but I knew the foundation I was standing on had just turned to sand. I tried another code, a random guess. His mother's birthday. Nothing. His old jersey number from college. Nothing. Then, a thought, ugly and insidious, slithered into my mind. I typed in a date from 2 years ago, the day he'd supposedly been on a business trip to Chicago, the first time I'd felt that gnawing, nameless anxiety in the pit of my stomach. The phone unlocked. And there it was. A whole secret life, laid bare in glowing pixels. Texts, hundreds of them, to a name I didn't recognize.
Chloe.
The messages were a sickening mix of mundane logistics and explicit intimacy. Running late, Julian is droning on about quarterly reports. Julian was Mark's boss. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. I'm wearing the dress you like. There were pictures. Her, laughing in a restaurant I'd never been to. Her, in a hotel room, the corner of Mark's briefcase just visible on a chair. Her face tilted up to the camera, a possessive, triumphant smile on her lips. She was beautiful, in a sharp, glossy way. The kind of woman you see on the cover of business magazines.
Polished. Hard.
Ambitious. I sank to the floor, the pile of laundry a soft, meaningless heap around me. The air left my lungs in a whoosh, as if I'd been punched. I scrolled and scrolled, a masochistic compulsion driving my thumb downward, each message another nail in the coffin of my marriage. It had been going on for 2 years. 2 years of lies, of secret dinners, of stolen weekends. 2 years while I was at home, watering his plants, making his favorite meals, writing a novel about a love I thought was real. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy, a meticulously managed, parallel life. I don't know how long I sat there, on the cold tile of the laundry room floor, the phone screen illuminating my tears. The sound of the front door opening and closing jolted me back to reality.
Mark was home early.
I heard his footsteps in the hall, the jingle of his keys as he dropped them in a ceramic bowl on the console table. The bowl I'd made in a pottery class he'd signed me up for as a birthday present. The irony was a bitter pill in my throat. "Anna," he called out. "You here?" I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked out of the laundry room, the secret phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. He was in the living room, loosening his tie, his back to me. He looked tired. For a moment, a wave of the old, familiar sympathy washed over me. He works so hard. But it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard fury. He turned, a weary smile on his face, and then he saw the phone in my hand. The smile vanished. His face didn't register guilt or shame. It registered annoyance. The look of a man whose careful planning had just been inconveniently disrupted. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "In your jacket pocket," I said, my own voice a stranger's, thin and reedy. "Who is Chloe, Mark?" He sighed a long, put-upon sound, as if I were a child asking a tiresome question. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Look, Anna, we can talk about this. Talk about what? I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest. Talk about your entire other life? The one you've been living for 2 years behind my back? The trips, the dinners, the woman you've been sleeping with while I was here, waiting for you? He didn't flinch. He just watched me, his gaze analytical, calculating. It's not what you think, isn't it? I held up the phone. It's all right here, Mark. In black and white. Pictures. Texts. I'm wearing the dress you like. It seems pretty clear to me what it is. He crossed the room and stood before me, his presence suddenly overwhelming in our shared space. He didn't try to take the phone. He just looked down at me, his expression hardening. The mask of the doting husband fell away, and for the first time, I saw the man he had become. A stranger with my husband's face. All right, he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling register. You want to know?
Fine.
Her name is Chloe. And yes, we're together. The bluntness of it stole my breath again. I had expected denials, excuses, pleas for forgiveness. Not this cold, hard confession. Why? The word was a whisper. It was the only question that mattered. He looked around a room, at the bookshelves filled with my novels, at the framed photos of us on the mantelpiece, smiling in Paris, laughing on a beach in Thailand, cutting our wedding cake. His gaze was dismissive, as if he were looking at the relics of a forgotten civilization. And then he said it, the words that would become the anthem of my grief, the catalyst for my rage. She's better than you. He let the words hang there, a final, brutal verdict. She understands my world, Anna. She's ambitious. She gets it. She doesn't spend her days in a fantasy land, playing with words. She's in the real world. With me. The world didn't just crack. It shattered. In that moment, he didn't just confess to an affair. He invalidated my entire existence. My dreams, my work, my very essence. He dismissed it all as a childish game. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had erased me. The days that followed are a blur of gray misery. I moved out in a daze, packing my life into cardboard boxes while Mark was conveniently at the office. Each book I packed, each piece of clothing I folded, felt like a betrayal. I was dismantling the museum of my own failure. I found a small, soulless apartment on the other side of town. It smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbors arguing, their angry words a constant, mocking soundtrack to my own silent grief. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the lumpy, second-hand sofa and stared at the water-stained ceiling, replaying his words over and over in my head. She's better than you. The sentence was a virus, infecting every thought, every memory. Was he right? Had I become this small, irrelevant person, lost in my fictional worlds while the real one spun on without me? I looked at my laptop, at the half-finished manuscript that was supposed to be my masterpiece. It seemed pathetic now, a monument to my own delusion. The divorce papers arrived via a cold, impersonal courier. Mark was being generous, his lawyer's letter stated. He was offering a one-time settlement, a sum that was insulting, designed to make me feel small and dependent. It was predicated on the argument that my writing was a non-contributing hobby, not a career. He was legally, financially, trying to codify my irrelevance. My own lawyer, a kind but pragmatic woman named Sarah, looked at me over the top of her glasses. He's playing hardball, Anna. His firm has the best legal team in the city. They're going to bury us in paperwork and bleed you dry until you accept this. It's not about the money, I whispered, my voice hoarse from disuse. I know, she said gently. It never is. It's about the story they're trying to tell about you. And right now, he controls the narrative. The narrative. The word struck me. All my life, I had been a storyteller. But in the story of my own life, I had become a minor character, a footnote in the grand tale of Mark and Chloe. I tried to write. I really did. I thought maybe I could find some solace in my fictional world, a place where I was in control. But the words were gone. Every time I opened the document, all I could see was his face, his cold eyes, his dismissive smirk. The blinking cursor mocked me, a rhythmic reminder of my own emptiness. My agent, who had once been so enthusiastic about my project, started calling less frequently. Her voice, once warm and encouraging, now held a note of strained patience. The publishing world doesn't wait for heartbreak. Meanwhile, Mark's world flourished. He and Chloe were a fixture on the city's social scene. Their pictures were all over social media, tagged by mutual friends I could no longer bring myself to speak to. Mark and Chloe at a charity gala. Mark and Chloe on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Mark and Chloe, their arms around each other, smiling, radiant, successful. Chloe was always impeccably dressed, her smile sharp and confident. She was the woman he had described. Ambitious.
Real.
Better. Each photo was a fresh stab of pain. It wasn't just that he was happy. It was that he was so publicly, performatively happy. He was curating the story of his new life, and in that story, I was the drab, boring first draft that had to be deleted to make way for the brilliant final version. He was poisoning the well, ensuring everyone in our old life saw him as the victor, the one who had upgraded. My savings began to dwindle at an alarming rate. The rent on my sad little apartment, my lawyer's fees, the simple cost of living. It was all adding up. I started looking for part-time jobs, anything to stay afloat. I applied to be a barista, a bookstore clerk, a dog walker. The rejections were polite but firm. I was overqualified, they said, or underexperienced. The truth was I was a ghost. A 35-year-old woman whose only real-world skill, according to my soon-to-be ex-husband, was a hobby. The crisis deepened. Sarah called with bad news. Mark's lawyers had filed a motion to have my request for alimony dismissed entirely. They had hired a private investigator who had taken pictures of me walking into coffee shops with my laptop, trying to write. They were framing it as me having ample leisure time, proving I was capable of working but choosing not to. It was a cruel, brilliant move. They were using my passion, the one thing I had left, as a weapon against me. "They're twisting everything, Anna," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration. "They're painting you as lazy, as a gold digger. We have to fight back, but it's going to be expensive. And honestly, our chances aren't great." That night, the weight of it all became unbearable. I was losing everything. My husband, my home, my financial security, my friends. And worst of all, I was losing myself. The writer inside me, the part of me that had always been my sanctuary, was silent, maybe even dead. Mark had won. He had successfully erased me, not just from his life, but from my own. I sat in the dark, the city lights a distant, indifferent glitter outside my window. The final settlement offer from his lawyer sat on my coffee table, a white flag of surrender. It was a pittance, but it would be enough to make them go away, to stop the bleeding. All I had to do was sign it, admit defeat, accept the story they had written for me. My gaze fell on my laptop. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I felt a sudden, violent urge to destroy it, to smash it against the wall, to shatter the screen, to obliterate the blinking cursor that had tormented me for months. I wanted to burn the manuscript, to turn all those useless, hopeful words into ash. I picked it up, my hands shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. I opened the lid. The screen flickered to life, displaying the last page I had worked on, months ago. A love scene. It was so naive, so full of a belief in a kind of love that I now knew was a fiction. A childish fantasy. My finger hovered over the delete key. One press, and it would all be gone. The years of work, the dreams, the last vestige of the woman I used to be. "Just let it go," a voice in my head whispered. "It's over."
He was right.
"You're nothing." But then, another voice, quieter but fiercer, rose from the depths. It was a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. It was the writer. And it was angry. My fingers moved, but not to the delete key. I scrolled up, back to the beginning. Chapter 1. I started to read. The story was a sweet, predictable romance about a librarian who falls for a charming architect. It was gentle. It was safe. It was a lie. And, in that moment, something shifted. The grief that had been a suffocating fog began to crystallize. It sharpened into something else. Something hard and clear and cold. It was rage. A pure, undiluted rage that burned away the tears and the self-pity. He said I lived in a fantasy land?
Fine.
He wanted a story? I would give him one. I wouldn't just delete the manuscript. I would gut it. I would tear it down to the studs and rebuild it from the foundation of my own shattered heart. I wouldn't write about the love I had imagined. I would write about the love that had been, and the betrayal that had destroyed it. I would write about the cold, calculating stranger who wore my husband's face. I would write about the glossy, ambitious woman who was better. I would use their own narrative and twist it into something they could never control.
My pain was not a weakness.
It was my power.
It was the ink.
And I had an entire ocean of it. I created a new document. The page was white, pristine, a blank slate. The blinking cursor was no longer a taunt. It was an invitation.
Adare.
My fingers flew across the keyboard, the clicking sounds filling the silent apartment.
I didn't stop to think.
I didn't edit. I just poured it all out. The rain, the second phone, the laundry room floor, the look on his face. The words. Especially the words. I fictionalized it, of course. My name was no longer Anna, it was Alara. Mark became Julian, a name that sounded as cold and classical as he was. Chloe became Isabel, a name that glittered with sharp, beautiful edges. The setting was no longer our cozy suburban home, but a sleek, minimalist city apartment. The details were changed, but the emotional truth was raw, brutal, and undeniable. The first chapter was a direct transcription of my heart's murder. I wrote the scene in the living room, the ticking clock, the weight of the silence. And I gave Julian the line. I typed it out, the words feeling both venomous and liberating on the screen. He looked at her, his face a mask of indifference. It's simple, Alara, he said, his voice as smooth and cold as river stone. She's better than you. I wrote through the night, fueled by black coffee and a fury so potent it felt like a superpower. The writer's block didn't just break, it exploded. The story poured out of me, dark and complex and real.
It was no longer a romance.
It was a tragedy. It was a thriller. It was the story of a woman who was pushed from a cliff and, on the way down, learned how to fly. For weeks, this became my life. I barely slept. I lived on toast and tea. The outside world faded away. The legal battle, the dwindling bank account, the loneliness, it all became background noise. My real life was on the page. I chronicled every humiliation, every small cruelty, every moment of despair. But in the story, Alara didn't just crumble. She took the pain and forged it into armor. She took the insults and sharpened them into swords. She was my avatar, my avenger. She was everything I was too broken to be in real life. She was strategic. She was relentless. She was a survivor. I wove in details of Julian's world, the world Mark had claimed I didn't understand. I used the jargon I'd overheard for years, the casual talk of mergers and acquisitions, of corporate takeovers and backroom deals. I painted a portrait of a man so consumed by ambition that his humanity had withered and died, a man who saw people not as souls, but as assets or liabilities. And Alara, the quiet, dreamy writer, began to see the patterns, to understand the game. She started to use his own logic against him. After a month of this feverish, obsessive work, I had a complete manuscript. It was raw, it was angry, and it was the most honest thing I had ever written. I read it from beginning to end, my heart pounding. It was good. It was more than good. It was true. I attached the file to an email and sent it to my agent, Eleanor. I didn't write a long, pleading note. I didn't make excuses for my months of silence. I just wrote a single sentence. Eleanor, this is the one. The response came less than 24 hours later. It was a one-word email in all caps. Brilliant. Followed by, call me.
Now.
When I called her, she was breathless. Anna, what is this? Where did this come from? It's ferocious. It's devastating. I couldn't put it down. This isn't just a book, it's a reckoning. She told me to sit tight, that she was sending it out immediately. And Anna, she added, her voice dropping, becoming serious. Get ready. Your life is about to change. I wanted to believe her, but years of disappointment had tempered my hope. I expected a few polite rejections, maybe a small offer from an independent press. I went back to my life of waiting, of checking my bank balance with a knot of dread in my stomach. A week later, Eleanor called again. I could hear the smile in her voice. Are you sitting down? Should I be? I asked, my heart starting to flutter. We have an offer, she said. That's great. I felt a rush of relief. Enough to pay my legal bills, maybe.
No, Anna.
We have 5 offers. There's a bidding war. I sank onto my lumpy sofa, the phone pressed hard against my ear. A bidding war? For my book? My story of rage and heartbreak? It didn't seem real. Eleanor explained the details, the names of the publishing houses, the dizzying numbers. They weren't just buying a book. They were buying a story that felt urgent, timely, a voice that demanded to be heard. The war lasted for 3 days. Each call from Eleanor brought a higher number, more promises of marketing support, of international rights, of film options. It was surreal. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching a movie about someone else. On the final day, the winning bid came in. The number was so large, I made Eleanor repeat it 3 times. It was a life-changing amount of money. The kind of money that didn't just buy security, it bought freedom, it bought power. I hung up the phone in a state of shock. I walked to the window of my dingy apartment and looked out at the city. For the first time in a year, I felt like I was a part of it again, not just a ghost haunting its edges. A slow, wide smile spread across my face. It felt foreign, like stretching a muscle I hadn't used in years. The news broke a week later. It started as a small announcement in a publishing trade magazine, but it quickly caught fire. Debut author's scathing, revenge novel, lands 7-figure deal. The headline was sensational, irresistible. The article mentioned the book's premise. A wife, a writer, scorned by her powerful financier husband for a younger, more ambitious woman, who then channels her heartbreak into a blockbuster novel. They quoted the explosive opening line from Chapter 1. The story went viral. It was picked up by online news sites, by literary blogs, by lifestyle magazines. It was the perfect narrative for the internet age, a story of betrayal, empowerment, and a woman reclaiming her voice. My name, Anna Sterling, was everywhere. And so was the story of Alara and Julian. My phone started ringing off the hook. Old friends, the ones who had quietly drifted away, were suddenly calling to congratulate me, their voices thick with feigned intimacy. But there was one call I was waiting for. And on a Friday afternoon, it finally came. The caller ID was blocked, but I knew who it was. I let it ring 4 times, then answered, my voice deliberately calm and steady. Hello. Anna? It's Mark. His voice was tight, strained, a wire pulled taut. Mark, I said, as if surprised to hear from him. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play games with me, he snapped. I've seen the articles. What the hell do you think you're doing? I'm not sure what you mean, I said, walking over to my kitchen counter, pouring myself a glass of water. My hand was perfectly steady. I wrote a book. It's what I do. You remember, don't you? My little hobby. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. This isn't a hobby. This is a character assassination. Everyone is calling me. My partners, my clients. They're all asking if Julian is supposed to be me. Is he? I asked, taking a sip of water. I wouldn't know. He's a fictional character. Bullshit, he roared, the carefully constructed facade of the calm, powerful executive cracking. You used everything. The way I talk, my job, the things I said. That line in the first chapter. You're trying to ruin me. Ruin you. I allowed a small, cold laugh to escape my lips. Mark, you're a master of that yourself. I'm just a storyteller, remember? I'm just writing what I know. I'll sue you, he threatened, his voice dropping to a low growl. I'll sue you for defamation. I'll drag you through the courts for years. You'll never see a penny of that money. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment my fictional avatar, Alara, had played out in my head 1,000 times. The final move in a game he didn't even know we were playing. I let the silence stretch, letting his threat hang in the air. I wanted him to stew in his own impotent rage. You could do that, I said finally, my voice as soft and sharp as a shard of ice. You could certainly try. A defamation suit. That would be fascinating. What are you talking about? He demanded. Well, think about it, Mark. The discovery process. It's very thorough. My lawyers would get to subpoena all of your records. Emails, texts, phone logs. All those lovely messages between you and Chloe on your secret little phone. They'd become part of the public record. All those hotel receipts you expensed as client entertainment. The flight records from your business trips. It would all come out. There was a dead silence on the other end of a line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the frantic calculations. I decided to twist the knife, just a little deeper. And Chloe, I continued, my voice conversational, almost pitying. What was the name of her firm again? Oh, that's right. Sterling and Finch. A direct competitor to that company you've been trying to merge with for the past year. Can you imagine how her bosses would feel if they saw hundreds of emails from their top analyst to a senior partner at a rival firm, sharing insights? Discussing your boss, Robert? It would look an awful lot like a conflict of interest. Maybe even corporate espionage. I'm sure her career could withstand the scrutiny, though. She's very ambitious, after all. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a man realizing that the chessboard he thought he was commanding was, in fact, a minefield. He had walked right into the center of it, and I had my hand on the detonator. He thought he was holding a gun to my head, but he had been pointing it at himself the whole time. He had built his entire world on a foundation of carefully managed secrets and lies. He thought his power came from his money, his position, his ability to control the narrative. But I had found something more powerful. A paper trail. An electronic footprint. The truth, packaged as fiction. By trying to silence me, by threatening to sue, he would trigger the very mechanism that would expose everything. He would not just ruin his own career, he would take Chloe down with him. The ambitious woman he had chosen, the one who was better, would be his undoing. The irony was so perfect, so complete, it was almost poetic. Anna, he finally whispered, his voice broken. All the anger, the arrogance, was gone. All that was left was fear. It's your choice, Mark, I said, my voice softening, not with sympathy, but with the quiet finality of a judge delivering a verdict. You can sue me, and we can let the world see the real story. The one with receipts. Or you can let me have mine. The fictional one. The one that's about to make me a very wealthy woman. He didn't answer. He just made a choked, strangled sound, and the line went dead. I put my phone down on the counter. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt quiet. The storm that had been raging inside me for a year had finally passed. The air was still and clear. I had won. But it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the fact that I had refused to be erased. I had taken the story he tried to force on me, the one where I was the pathetic, discarded wife, and I had written a new one. A better one. The book, titled The Julian Sanction, was released 6 months later. It debuted at #1 on every bestseller list and stayed there for weeks. The film rights were sold in a heated auction. My face was on the cover of magazines, not as a scorned wife, but as a literary sensation. In interviews, I was always asked the same question, in a dozen different ways. Is it true? I always gave the same answer, a small, knowing smile on my face. It's fiction. But all good fiction is born from a place of emotional truth, don't you think? I never named him. I never had to. The world loves a good story, and mine was irresistible. People drew their own conclusions. And, in the court of public opinion, Mark was tried and convicted. I heard through the grapevine what happened next. The whispers at his firm grew too loud to ignore. The failed merger with a rival company was a huge blow to his reputation. Clients became wary. Partners looked at him with suspicion. His carefully constructed world began to crumble, not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing decay. He wasn't fired. That would have been too clean.
He was just marginalized.
Sidelined. Made irrelevant. The same fate he had tried to assign to me. Chloe left him. Her career had been damaged by the rumors, the association with him. Her ambition, the very quality he had admired, was what made her cut her losses and run. She couldn't afford to be tied to a sinking ship. I almost felt sorry for her. She was just another character in his story, and when her role was no longer convenient, she was written out. One evening, about a year after the book came out, I was in a taxi, heading home from a celebratory dinner with Eleanor. We drove past a bar I recognized, a place Mark and I used to go for quiet drinks after work. And I saw him. He was sitting alone at an outdoor table, nursing a whiskey. He looked smaller. The tailored suit was still expensive, but it seemed to hang off him.
His shoulders were slumped.
His face, illuminated by the streetlights, was etched with a weariness that went bone deep. He looked up as my taxi passed, and for a split second, our eyes met through the glass. There was no anger in his gaze.
No hatred.
Just a vast, empty bewilderment. The look of a king who couldn't understand how he had lost his kingdom. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze for that brief moment, and then the taxi turned the corner, and he was gone. I moved into a beautiful new apartment, one with high ceilings and a view of the entire city skyline. I had a dedicated office, lined with bookshelves from floor to ceiling. In the center of the main shelf, there was a single, leather-bound copy of the Julian Sanction. Sometimes I would just stand there and look at it. It wasn't a trophy of my revenge. It was a testament to my survival. It was the story of how I had taken the ugliest, most painful experience of my life and turned it into art, into freedom. I started writing my second novel. It wasn't about betrayal or revenge. It was a story about hope, about second chances, about finding love in unexpected places. The words came easily now. My voice was clear, confident, and entirely my own. I had learned that the ultimate power isn't in controlling someone else's narrative. It's in having the courage to write your own. Mark had tried to erase my story, to reduce me to a footnote in his. But in the end, he had become a single, dark chapter in mine. A chapter one had finished, a chapter one had closed. And the rest of the book, my book, was still unwritten. And it was going to be a masterpiece. The best stories aren't always about getting even. Sometimes they're about getting whole. If this story found you when you needed it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.